At the very beginning of the One Piece story, we're told that there are three great powers in the One Piece world, whose power balance is the reason that there's currently world peace. Those three great powers are the 7 Warlords of the Sea, Marine Headquarters, and the 4 Emperors of the Sea. We've already talked about the Admirals on this channel, link to that video in the description, and the 7 Warlords of the Sea have been disbanded, so I'm gonna leave them for another time. That means that today, we're here to talk about the 4 Emperors of the Sea, and even though you would think that that means that we'd only be talking about 4 characters in these videos, that isn't the case at all. This is because, just like most things throughout the One Piece story, the ranks of the Yonko have evolved as the story has gone on, as there have been 7 total characters that have held Emperor status in the story so far. All 7 of these characters are really interesting, and one of them even features our main character, so you guys already know that we have a lot to talk about today, even though we'll only be covering the original 4. The 4 Emperors are a group of 4 pirates considered to be the most notorious and powerful captains in the world. The Emperors have historically resided within the second half of the Grand Line, captaining powerful subordinates and massive fleets, as well as exerting influence and control over dozens of other pirate crews and self-governing islands. For the most part, each Emperor works alone and is constantly at odds with other Emperors and the world government. In fact, we've only really seen 2 Yonko team up one time in the One Piece story so far, and that was when Kaido and Big Mom teamed up during Wano. I guess you could say that Shanks and the Whitebeard pirates teamed up after Marineford, but that was only really to pay respects to both Ace and Whitebeard, and it wasn't like they fought anybody together. So, we've got 7 total characters to talk about in these videos. One of them is confirmed to be dead, 2 of them have statuses that are currently unknown, and the other 4 are still alive and are the characters that make up the current Yonko roster. We're of course going to be talking about them in the order that they were Yonko, so we're going to talk about the original 4 first, and then we'll talk about the characters that have become Yonko as the story has gone on. And with that, I think it's time to hop into the first one, and I only think it's right to talk about the world's strongest man, Whitebeard, first. Edward Newgate, more well known as Whitebeard, was a legendary pirate and the captain of the Whitebeard Pirates. Not only was he known as the world's strongest man, he was also considered the man closest to the One Piece after Roger's death. With that being said, despite all of his strength and the tons of people that he had by his side, he never claimed the One Piece despite knowing that it's real, and there's a reason for that. This is because, due to being an orphan who grew up in poverty, Whitebeard had a strong desire for family, which he saw as the greatest treasure one could have. While he didn't claim the One Piece despite being the man closest to it, he did achieve his dream of having a large family, as every crew member and other pirate crew that follows him refers to him as Pops. He was the father that a lot of pirates didn't have growing up on the seas, so it wasn't only his strength that gained him the respect that he truly deserved. We're also still learning more about Whitebeard despite the fact that he died during the Marineford War, as he's a prominent member of both the Odin flashback and the God Valley flashback that we're currently getting. His early history as a pirate saw him as a member of the legendary Rocks Pirates due to the fact that he lost a Davy back fight to him over 48 years ago. He did a ton of different things with the Rocks Pirates, including creating relationships with both Big Mom and Kaido, and having the hots for Shaggy, which it seems like everybody in the One Piece world had at the time. His time in the Rocks Pirates also meant that he was on God Valley during the fabled God Valley incident, as he was even one of the original people who was fighting against Emu before Emu turns Rocks into a demon. It was really at this moment that the Rocks Pirates disbanded, and about 5 years after the God Valley incident, Whitebeard's own crew, the Whitebeard Pirates, was formed. Seeing as he was a former Rocks Pirates member, it was probably around this time that he also became a Yonko alongside Kaido and Big Mom, who also formed their own crews. After this, about 30 years ago, the Whitebeard Pirates went to Wano where they got shipwrecked, and even though he didn't want to take Odin with him at first, Odin eventually gained his respect when he passed his test. This actually led to the creation of the division system that we see in the Whitebeard Pirates at the Marineford War, where Odin is actually appointed as the very first commander of the 2nd Division. This means that Odin and Ace are connected in a way that you wouldn't expect, because the only other 2nd Division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates that we've seen in this story is Ace. It was around the time of the division creation that Whitebeard also allowed Blackbeard to join his crew, and there's a whole lot more stuff that we're going to talk about regarding him when we eventually get to his part of the series. A lot of fun stuff happens while Odin is on Whitebeard's crew, like Whitebeard's final clash with Roger, which really shows why Whitebeard was declared the strongest after Roger's execution. Seeing two absolute legends first fight and then talk about each other's goals was absolutely incredible, and it was also because of Whitebeard that Oden ended up joining Roger's crew. Whitebeard is just such a likable character every time that he appears, and while there were some cool stuff that happened between Roger's execution and his adoption of Ace, it's that adoption that we need to talk about next. You see, about 3 years before Luffy set out on his own journey, Ace had a 5-day battle against Jinbei where it ended in a draw when both men went down at the same time. Right after this fight, Whitebeard approached the Spade pirates aboard the Moby Dick and told his own crew that he would deal with Ace alone. Now, despite the fact that Whitebeard defeated Ace without getting a single scratch himself, he still saw the potential in Ace and drafted him into his crew. This was how Ace became the 2nd Division commander of the Whitebeard pirates by the time that we saw him in Alabasta, despite the fact that he tried to assassinate his new father multiple times. Whitebeard's handling of Ace is one of the best things about his character in my opinion, because we all know how much Ace hated the fact that he was the son of the king of the pirates, but Whitebeard didn't care at all. Despite thinking that it would be a big deal when he first told him, Ace wasn't met with ridicule because according to Whitebeard, everyone is a son of the sea. Whitebeard never hated Roger despite the fact that they were rivals, and Ace being Roger's son doesn't matter because he already sees Ace as one of his own. It was so nice to see a person as headstrong and loyal as Ace have so many people in his life that cared about him as much as he cared about them, and Whitebeard is one of the main examples of that. And now that Ace is on his crew, we can talk about what Whitebeard does during the current day of the story, because despite his age, he still has some moments that only make his legend grow. In his very first appearance during the Jaya arc, it was already obvious that he was larger than life, quite literally and figuratively, towering over everybody on his ship and ripping up a letter that Shanks had someone deliver for him. It's also during this time that we learn that he's pretty sick, seeing as he has a ton of doctors surrounding him and all of these tubes in his body, but that illness isn't gonna stop him from being a total badass. Then, during the post-Enies lobby arc, we get the first meeting between two Yonko that we get in the entire story, as Shanks goes to visit Whitebeard because he has something important to talk to him about. This scene is written and drawn so well by Oda, because even though it's clearly friendly most of the time, there's just that air of tension that makes you believe that things could pop off at any time. Shanks flexing his Conqueror's Haki on his stroll up is some next level trolling, and Whitebeard just sitting there because he knows he's fine, and accepting Shanks' gift was the icing on top. They then have a friendly conversation, with Shanks telling Whitebeard the reason that he gave up his arm, but things get tense once again once Shanks brings up some members of Whitebeard's crew. Mainly how he doesn't think that it's a good idea for Ace to go after Blackbeard, and even though Whitebeard told him the same thing, he still stands up for his son's decision and clashes with Shanks. Coming to learn that Whitebeard was against Ace going after Blackbeard during the Marineford War, and then backing up his son's decision in public, is yet another reason as to why Whitebeard is a goated character. Speaking of Marineford, Whitebeard doesn't really appear in the story again until that arc, and his performance at Marineford is something that's still stuck in my mind to this day. Not only was he a one-man wrecking crew against the Navy's best soldiers, he also has another character moment with one of the members of his crew that makes him the best father that a pirate could ask for. During Marineford, we're introduced to a character named Squard, and after he lost his entire crew to Roger, Whitebeard took him in and treated him like a son, saving him from the loneliness of losing all of his comrades. Squard, in return, thought of Whitebeard as a father figure, but felt betrayed when he thought that Whitebeard was planning to sacrifice all of his subordinate crews to save Ace, leading him to stab Whitebeard in a surprise attack. Whitebeard was able to prove otherwise, of course, and Squard broke down in tears at his mistake. This leads to my favorite Whitebeard quote of them all when he says, "Squard, how dare you draw your sword against your father? What a stupid son you are. You may be a fool, but I still love you. I know how much you hate Gold Roger, but it's wrong to condemn a child for the sins of his father, Squard. What did Ace ever do to you? Be good to each other. Ace isn't the only one who's special to me. I love all my children." It would have been perfectly acceptable for Whitebeard not to accept Squard after he betrayed him, but that's not the kind of man that Whitebeard is, so he makes sure that his son still knows that he's loved. This is a huge moment in this arc, not only for Whitebeard's character, but also for what it does to the momentum of the war itself. Squard stabbed stabbing Whitebeard was seen as a moment where it was basically confirmed that the Whitebeard pirates were currently losing, but once Whitebeard forgives Squard and rallies his troops, it's like all of them are given a second wind. Whitebeard even gives his allies the means to escape if they want to by opening a path with his devil fruit, but everybody believes what he's selling, and the Navy, especially Sengoku, immediately realizes that their plan backfired. And once Whitebeard is on the move at Marineford, his presence is felt immediately, even though he's extremely sick, as we established with his very first appearance. In all honesty, he was still a menace when he was just standing on his ship, defeating a vice admiral in a single hit, and quite literally catching one of Akainu's magma rocks on his giant sword. The aura that this man exudes is incomparable, and that's only heightened with his extremely overpowered devil fruit, the Gura Gura no Mi. This is of course a paramecia devil fruit that allows Whitebeard to literally create earthquakes, and is one of the main reasons as to why Whitebeard is referred to as the strongest man in the world. The best fight that he has during Marineford is obviously his fight against Akainu, and the fact that he was the only one that was able to do damage to him really speaks volumes. He had also taken a ton of damage from swords, guns, and bullets at this point, and even fought on after Akainu took out a part of his face, forcing him out of the battle with a tremor. The ultimate betrayal of Blackbeard made the conclusion of his character hit extra hard, and everybody is aware of the panel showcasing him dead standing up, but I'm gonna quote it anyway. Even in death, even with half of his face gone, he would never fall. He will forever be remembered as a monster for the way that he destroyed his enemies that day. In this one battle alone, he suffered 267 sword wounds, was struck by 152 bullets, and 46 cannon blasts. And yet, neither that mighty body nor his pirate pride suffered even one coward's wound. This is quite literally the perfect way for a character like Whitebeard to go out, as not only did it perfectly embody him, it also perfectly embodied the people that served under him. Whitebeard not only embodied the title of Yonko, he also embodied the title of World's Strongest Man, and that's why I felt like it would be wrong if he wasn't the first person that I talked about in this video. Charlotte Lin Lin, better known as Big Mom, is the captain of the Big Mom Pirates, and was formerly one of the 4 emperors ruling over the New World, as the only female member of the group. She's the queen of an archipelago nation called Totoland, a place she seeks to form into a utopia where all the world's races can live together in peace without discrimination or segregation. She's also known as Big Mom because her main crew consists of her children, and this lady has had 85 children, so her crew is pretty damn big. Just like Whitebeard, she's also big as hell, as she's 880 centimeters, which is 28 feet and 10 inches tall. I also believe that she has the most intimidating debut out of all of the original Yonko, as she first appears during the Fishman Island arc, and Luffy gets on her bad side right away. The double page spread of her drooling over the Denden Mushi like she wants to come fight Luffy right away is truly terrifying, and Big Mom has always had a scary presence to me. In all honesty, she kinda becomes the least serious member of the Yonko because of things like her hunger pangs during Whole Cake Island, and the amnesia that she got during Wano, but I think her goofiness makes her even more dangerous. Like Aokiji, how goofy Big Mom is at times can make you forget just how powerful she is, and then she overpowers Queen with a headbutt while having no memories, and you remember just how dangerous she is. She also has a fight to the death against both Law and Kid, where Law and Kid barely win despite the fact that they both awakened their devil fruits shortly before the battle started. Just like Whitebeard, she was also a member of the Rocks Pirates in her early days of being a pirate, but her legend didn't really start when she was already a pirate. When Big Mom was just 5 years old, she was on the island of Elbaf and had one of her hunger pangs, but instead of getting her the Selma she wanted, the Giants didn't feed her because of a festival that required everybody participating to do a 12-day fast. You see, this was bad for a young Big Mom, as she suffered greatly as she kept craving food, and on the 7th day of fasting, she finally snapped and went on a rampage to get Selma. During this rampage, she caused great destruction throughout the village and took down multiple giants, so her actions were deemed to be heresy by Jorul, who attacked her despite Mother Caramel's pleas. Now this seems like it would be good. Joro could totally stop the rampage of a 5-year-old, but instead she shattered his sword with her bare hands before grabbing him by the beard and throwing him to the ground, fatally wounding him. Joro was the co-captain of the original giant warrior pirates, was known as a hero of the giants and one of the world's oldest warriors, and is the brother of the current oldest warrior in the world, by the way. So Big Mom was a massive threat before she even became a pirate, and she only became a bigger threat once she ate Mother Caramel and got her Soru Soru no Mi. After she gained these powers, she was approached by this guy named Streusen, who thought that she was a monster, and it was because of him that she came up with her idea of creating Toto Land in the first place. Now Streusen is a character that's really strange in my opinion, because he's been with Big Mom almost every step of her journey, and we truly don't know all that much about him. He was also a member of the Rocks Pirates because of his connection to Big Mom, and he was the executive chef of the Big Mom Pirates. This guy has always just been weird to me, especially since he's been around Big Mom since she was 6 years old, and the fact that Big Mom became a mother at a pretty young age. I don't know, he's always kind of been a creep to me, but it was alongside him when Big Mom was 24 years old that she was a member of the Rocks Pirates. In fact, she was the reason that Kaido got his extremely overpowered devil fruit, and we recently learned that he actually stole it from her because she planned on giving it to her son, Katakuri. Luckily, Katakuri was able to get his own overpowered devil fruit, the Mochi Mochi no Mi, but it was because of the fact that Kaido got his fruit from Big Mom that the two of them eventually teamed up during the Wano arc. Kaido owed Big Mom a big favor, and she decided to act on it when they both had a common enemy, and that led to one of, if not the craziest battle that we've gotten in the series so far. Big Mom formed her own crew about 35 years ago after the Rocks Pirates disbanded after the God Valley incident, trying to become the Pirate King, but we all know that Roger beat her to it 25 years ago. Her children also have some insane lore, as at one point, the Prince of Elbaf Loki proposed to Big Mom's 23rd daughter, Lola. Big Mom saw this as an opportunity to not only quell her strained relationship with the Giants by making it a political marriage that would forge an alliance between Elbaf and Toto Land, but also a means to become the Pirate King because of the power granted by Elbaf's famed giant army. Lola, being the goat she is, was able to escape from the arranged marriage against her mother's will. Big Mom did try again by using Lola's older sister Chiffon as a substitute, but that plan didn't work, and it only made her already strained relationship with the Giants even worse. The hatred that Elbaf has for Big Mom is honestly hilarious in my opinion, because she's even come up during the Elbaf arc, and they hate her just as much now as they did when she was 5. After her attempt to marry into Elbaf failed, Big Mom gave up on trying to befriend them, and instead decided to focus on creating artificial giants. In order to do that, she commissioned our boy Caesar Clown to research gigantification in order to turn her family members into giants, and that's why we see some big children during the Punk Hazard arc. Another cool thing that Big Mom does is protect Fishman Island after Whitebeard passes away, only she does it a little more strictly than he did, as she demands large amounts of candy in return, and that's why there's a candy factory when the Straw Hats visit Fishman Island. When it comes to the current day of the story, she of course becomes relevant because of the Whole Cake Island arc, and her plan to assassinate the Vinsmoke family after having her youngest daughter Pudding marry Sanji to form an alliance with them. She actually came up with this plan a while ago because of Germa 66's cloning technology, but she was only able to attempt it after the time skip because they couldn't find Sanji until he had a bounty of his own. Big Mom loves herself in arranged marriage, but the Whole Cake Island arc truly reveals something interesting about her character. In my opinion, despite the fact that she's a Yonko and one of the foremost powerful pirates in all of One Piece, she's always felt like a side threat and never the main threat. That's obviously the case in Wano, since the whole goal of that arc was to defeat Kaido from the very beginning, but that also seems to be the case during the Whole Cake Island arc, especially after the failed wedding between Sanji and Pudding. Soon after the Straw Hats crash the wedding and show Big Mom a broken picture of Mother Caramel, causing her to crash out, she has one of her hunger pangs and is quite literally kited like like a Call of Duty zombie. I mean, sure, she's still a giant threat even while being kited, and Sanji even joins her chefs to make an amazing wedding cake by the end of the arc, but she's always a background threat and never the main one. This also may be my main character bias since they're always my favorite characters in stories, but Katakuri is a much bigger threat because if Luffy loses to him, the Straw Hat Pirates probably disband right then and there. With that being said, there is an overlooked moment in this arc where Luffy tries to attack Big Mom in Gear 4th and gets one-shotted, actually making her the first Yonko that does this to him and not Kaido. I have never been someone to underestimate Big Mom when it comes to her strength, but she has always felt like the goofiest Yonko in my opinion. In all honesty, that isn't the worst thing ever since one of them has to hold that title, and even if we never see her again, she definitely made a huge impact on the One Piece story. Kaido of the Beast is renowned as the world's strongest creature, the Governor General of the Beast Pirates, and was formerly one of the 4 Emperors of the Sea. Just like Whitebeard was known as the strongest man in the world, Kaido was known as the strongest creature in the world, and you could honestly debate who was stronger to this day. My money's on Whitebeard, but that doesn't change how strong Kaido is in the slightest, because I believe that he's still the strongest enemy that Luffy has faced in the story so far. Kaido is also the Yonko that appears the latest in the story, as this guy doesn't appear until chapter 795, but he definitely makes a huge impact when he does eventually appear. This is because, during his first appearance, he jumps off of a sky island in an attempt to unalive himself, but since he's so powerful, he just survives the fall and falls into a meeting between some of the members of the worst generation. If this isn't the way to introduce the threat that's been getting built up since the Punk Hazard arc, then I don't know what is. This man is scary and he hasn't even attacked anybody yet. I personally believe that Kaido is the simplest of all the Yonko as well, but that doesn't make his goal of creating a massive war so we can die a spectacular death any less interesting. Pretty much every important pirate has connections with either Rocks or Roger, and as I've already said multiple times in this video, Kaido was on the legendary Rocks crew alongside the other Yonko that I've already talked about. While he was in this crew, he had an interesting dynamic however, as he was nowhere near the strongest member of the crew, as he joined it when he was just 15 years old. He left the same time that everybody else did, and since becoming a pirate, Kaido had only been defeated 7 times and captured 18 times by the Marines and the other members of his former crew. It was during these many times being captured that he was taken to Punk Hazard one time, and that's where they were able to get a sample of his lineage factor in order to create the devil fruit that Momonosuke currently has. His devil fruit is easily the most powerful that's ever been recreated so far, and it was after he escaped the facility that he started building his own crew. This included a Lunarian that was being experimented on named Arbor, and a mad scientist named Sheen. Now those names might not mean anything to you, but those are the true names of both King and Queen, the 2 most powerful officers in Kaido's entire crew at the current day. Then, about 28 years ago, Kurozumi Higurushi approached Kaido with an offer of territory to build weapons factories in Wano, which is known for its skilled craftsmen, which would allow him to increase his might even further. Orochi was also close to seizing control of the shogunate, and as soon as he did, Kaido began his occupation of Wano. His occupation of Wano is honestly strange to me because he's a massive figure in Wano while Oden is still there, and truly starts to take the country over while Oden is out on his adventure. This is because 25 years ago, Kaido confronted Oden at the Shogun's castle because he tried to kill Orochi. This is when Kaido and Oden made a deal. If Oden danced naked in the flower capital once a week, then the people of Wano would be spared, and Kaido's crew would leave Wano in 5 years. This is what led to the Dancing Oden legend, and once Oden fulfilled his end of the promise, he went on his seafaring adventure with Whitebeard and Roger. While he was doing that, Kaido continued his occupation of Wano, and about 23 years ago, he fought against Gekko Moria in Ringo, and left him in the state that we saw him in during the Thriller Bark arc. We actually recently learned that Moria is from Wano, so his fight against Kaido in Wano, and his possession of Ryuma's body and sword makes a lot more sense now. It was 3 years after this that Oden finally made his return to Wano, and since it's immediately apparent that Kaido and his men won't be leaving, Oden rounds up his retainers to fight Kaido and his crew on Onigashima. This is the battle where Kaido got his iconic scar, as Oden was the one that gave it to him, and was looking like he was gonna win the fight before Higurushi Higurashi impersonated a kidnapped Momonosuke and distracted him. His scar is easily one of the most iconic parts of his design, and seeing the story of how he got it was incredibly interesting, and Kaido ended up killing Higurashi because of her interference. From Oden's death all the way up to the events of the Wano arc, his occupation of Wano continued as he gained more power and more weapons factories were built in the country. The state of Wano when Luffy and his crew finally get there is one of fool's gold, as the flower capital looks as beautiful as it's always looked, but the outskirts of the country are only getting worse and worse. We all know how insane the battle between Kaido and Luffy was, and that actually makes a lot of sense because of Luffy's connections with Joy Boy. Now you might wonder why that would matter, but Kaido believed that Joy Boy would be the only person that had a chance to defeat him. While Luffy was hitting Kaido with his final attack, Kaido remembered a conversation that he had with King once, in which he literally stated that Joy Boy would be the one who would be able to defeat him. Now Joy Boy is known as the very first pirate, so it makes sense that Kaido knows all about him, but I think that it might be a little bit deeper than that. We've learned throughout the Egghead Island and Elbaf arcs that the Giants have connections with Joy Boy and Nika, and something tells me that the Onis may have some sort of connection to them as well. With that being said, we won't really know until we see another Oni, because I'm pretty sure that Kaido is the only one that we've seen so far, but please let me know down in the comment section below if I'm wrong. And with that, I only have one more thing left to talk about when it comes to Kaido, because even though he made his first appearance during chapter 795, that wasn't the first time that he was mentioned. This is because he was actually mentioned during the Impel Down arc, and that's because when Whitebeard was on his way to Marineford, Kaido actually tried to stop him, as he saw this as the perfect opportunity to have the death that he's always wanted. This, however, was stopped by Shanks when he intercepted him, and that's why Shanks was able to make it to Marineford and end the war. Kaido always lived up to his title as the world's strongest creature, and if he's actually dead after the events of Wano, then his impact on the story will never be forgotten. I mean, honestly, even though he's dead, we could still learn new stuff about him in the future, just like we are right now with the God Valley flashback. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the final Yonko that we're going to talk about in this video, as we're going to talk about Shanks a little bit differently from the way that we talked about the other three. This is because I plan on talking about him in the video about the current Yonko as well, since he's the only original member that's still a member to this day. This means that in this video, I'll only be talking about the stuff that he does in the pre-time skip material, and that includes only talking about the flashbacks that we get before the time skip as well. So, red-haired Shanks, commonly known as just Red Hair, is the chief of the Red Hair Pirates, and one of the 4 emperors of the sea. He's also one of the characters that we get to see the earliest in the story, as he appears in the very first chapter, and only Luffy and Roger appear before him. This man is the reason that Luffy wanted to be a pirate in the first place, and he's the reason why Luffy has the overpowered devil fruit that he currently has. Both of those things could be revealed to be parts in the grand plan that he has, but only time will tell, and no matter what other motives he had, he still sacrificed one of his arms to save a little boy that really looked up to him. Shanks truly is an extremely laid-back man, preferring to take his time by traveling around the world with his crew and enjoying himself, as opposed to rushing from one place to another. His normal attitude is completely different from how he acts when he's serious, as he seems like a really cool guy most of the time, but if he has a problem with you, he becomes scary rather quickly. Shanks has always been one of my favorite characters because he's just cool, and you know that you're gonna get to see some cool stuff whenever he appears. Like, this man used to just have duels with the strongest swordsman in the world, Mihawk, and he's still alive to tell the tale, so it's pretty clear that they were pretty competitive. Like, Shanks making an appearance towards the end of the East Blue Saga with Mihawk coming to visit him is some of the coolest stuff in the early story, and I've always loved how much he looks forward to Luffy's career as a pirate. Even though he had the perfect chance to see Luffy again at the end of the Marineford War, he knew that Luffy hadn't become a great pirate yet, and that Luffy wouldn't want to meet him yet, so he refrained. We've also already talked about his meeting with Whitebeard about Ace, so I think we should talk about the time that he met with Ace. This was basically Ace meeting with Shanks to thank him for saving his little brother, and you can probably tell that this interaction was immediately positive as soon as Ace brought up Luffy. It's also clear that Shanks saw potential in Ace just like everybody else, as not only did he assume that Ace wanted to become the next king of the pirates, he also knew that his haki was already notably strong. There was also a time shortly after he lost his arm to the sea monster that he went to Rayleigh to talk about Luffy, beaming about the potential that he had because of the way that he said the same words as their captain. He's just such a likable character, and the final thing that he does before the time skip is stop the Marineford War, as Whitebeard's death was enough violence for that day. As that arc is winding down, it really seems like they're just gonna keep fighting when they don't need to, but Shanks comes in and shuts that shit down, and even Sengoku agrees that it's time for the fighting to stop. Seeing as they're one of the three great powers, it only makes sense that the Yonko would be extremely influential on the One Piece story, but given the characters that these guys are, it only makes sense that there's a lot to say about them. Hey guys, Zack here, and today we're here to finish off a two-part series that we started towards the beginning of last month. I've been making videos about the three great powers of the One Piece world because I find them to be really interesting groups, and two of those three powers required two-part series to really give them the coverage that they deserved. For those of you that don't know, the three great powers of the One Piece world are Marine Headquarters, the 7 Warlords of the Sea, and the 4 Emperors of the Sea, and it's said that the balance of power between them is what maintains world peace throughout the One Piece world. I've made at least one video about all three of them on this channel before, but it was easy to do just one about the Marine Headquarters because there have only been 5 admirals so far. I've also made a video about the original 7 Warlords of the Sea, but it would be a little weird if I made part 2 of that series so soon, since it was the part that I made the most recently. That means that today we're here to finish our discussion about the 4 Emperors of the Sea for now, and this time we'll be talking about how the group has changed since the time skip. Last time we talked about the original 4 members, Whitebeard, Shanks, Big Mom, and Kaido, so that means today we're here to talk about Blackbeard, Buggy, Luffy, and Shanks again. It was a lot of fun talking about the original members last time, and some absolutely insane shit has been going down since the time skip, so we still have a lot to talk about when it comes to today. So as a refresher, the 4 Emperors of the Sea are also referred to as the Yonko, and they're a group of 4 pirates considered to be the most notorious and powerful captains in the world. They typically spend most of their time in the New World, but there are a few that have territories in the first half of the Grand Line and in the 4 Blues. Essentially, these guys are the most important pirates in the world, and them and their crews have had massive impacts on the One Piece story as a whole. And with that, I think it's time to move on to talking about the Yonkos themselves, and I don't think it would be right if we didn't start this video off with the man that became a Yonko while Luffy was training during the time skip, Blackbeard. Blackbeard is kinda like Luffy in a way, as he's only really became a major player in the One Piece world during the 2 years that the main story has taken place. I mean, sure, he was a member of Whitebeard's crew from a very young age, but he just kinda blended into the background the whole time. He was also the guy that gave Shanks his iconic scar, but he was kinda just biding his time until his master plan could come into play. And his master plan eventually did come into play when Thatch of his division found the Yami Yami no Mi, and he killed him because that was a specific devil fruit that he had been looking for since he was a child. This was the action that caused Ace to go after him, and it was a good thing and a bad thing that Ace went after him because before Ace confronted Blackbeard, he actually planned on attacking Luffy in Water 7 just after the Straw Hats had saved Robin from Eni's lobby. No matter what you think about Blackbeard being an off-screen merchant, he definitely would have defeated Luffy at this time in the story, so he turned Ace in instead and got the warlord status that he was looking for. This status allowed him to do 2 major things that have led to the amount of power that he holds in the current story, and one of those things happened during the Impel Down arc, while the other happened during the Marineford arc. During Impel Down, not only did he meet Luffy and show off his new devil fruit against him, he also got past Magellan and freed a ton of the people that were in the secret 6th layer of the prison. This was where the most dangerous criminals locked up there were held, and it was because Blackbeard freed them, and that he was genuinely interesting to them, that a lot of them decided to follow him. A lot of the people that he freed from that level are still following him to this day, and are also some of the 10 Titanic captains of his Yonko crew. Then, once he gained his new crew, he decided to pull up to Marineford towards the end of the war, and did something that's truly the reason as to why he's one of the most powerful characters in the world at the current day. Him and his new crew pulled up to the Marineford War so late that Whitebeard was on his last leg, and that's exactly what Blackbeard was anticipating. That's why he was willing to engage Whitebeard in a fight with his whole crew crew by his side, but Whitebeard still put up a better fight than he anticipated. Unfortunately, Whitebeard was basically destined to die in this battle, and once he does die, we get one of the craziest moments in the entire One Piece story so far. This is because once he dies on his feet, the Blackbeard pirates throw a tarp over his body, and Blackbeard goes under it. Now, don't ask Blackbeard what he did under that tarp, but once he comes out, he not only shows off his powerful Yami Yami no Mi powers, he's also shown with the abilities of Whitebeard's Gura Gura no Mi. That's right, it's in this moment that Blackbeard becomes the one and only person in the One Piece world to have two Devil Fruit powers at the same time, and one of them just so happened to belong to the former strongest man in the world. And him and his crew basically get away from the Marineford War unscathed after they run away from Shanks, and that's what's allowed them to turn into the superpower that they are in the current story. This is because while Luffy was busy training with Rayleigh so him and his crew could survive the New World, Blackbeard was taking it over and doing things that would eventually make him seen as the emperor that replaced Whitebeard. Like the time that he fought the remnants of the Whitebeard pirates in a battle for Whitebeard's territories about 1 year into the time skip, and winning the battle that would eventually be known as the Payback War. Then, after the Rocky Port incident, he turned Hachinosu into his base of operations, and even has the crazy ambition of it one day being officially accepted into the world government as the Blackbeard Kingdom. This is not only insane because it would never happen, but also means a whole lot more after the events of the God Valley flashback, where it was revealed that Rox is his father, and that Hachinosu used to be Rox's base of operations as well. Yeah, that crazy reveal is something that needed to be talked about because it only makes Blackbeard and his crew more insane, as it seems like Blackbeard has picked up Rox's plan and is going about achieving it in an even more violent way. The Blackbeard pirates did some insane shit during the time skip, but since we've continued the story after those 2 years, they've done some even more insane shit that always makes you think about them and keep them in the back of your mind. Like the time that Blackbeard sent Burgess to Dressrosa in order to get the Mera Mera no Mi that Doflamingo was offering in the Colosseum battle. He of course didn't end up getting the fruit because Sabo did instead, but he did try to kill Luffy in the middle of his battle with Doflamingo, only to get stopped by Sabo there as well. He tried to kill Luffy in order to get his fruit of course, and that would have been bad back when it was just the Gumu Gumu no Mi, and now would have been catastrophic since we now know that Luffy actually had the Hito Hito no Mi Model Nika the whole time. Trying to imagine the Blackbeard pirates with both the Yami Yami no Mi and the Sun God fruit is genuinely scary, and they may have already completed their plan if they were able to steal and awaken Luffy's fruit. Now, even though Sabo defeated Burgess, he wouldn't be rid of him for long, as he actually managed to stow away on a Revolutionary Army ship where he landed at their home base of Baltigo. It was then that the Blackbeard pirates attacked the base in order to get the weapons and other things that they had there, but as we know, the Revolutionary Army was able to get away and set up their new base at the Kamabaka Kingdom. So they just attacked the base of the Revolutionary Army because they wanted to, and they even left it destroyed after they did so the world government couldn't learn anything about them. Then, sometime around here, I'm not quite sure if we've learned the exact time that he joined yet, Blackbeard and his crew met up with Aokiji, who had lost his battle with Akainu for the position of Fleet Admiral during the time skip as well. Even though their meeting was a little rocky at first, and Aokiji almost froze them all, they eventually had a good enough time that Aokiji decided to join the Blackbeard pirates and become one of their 10 Titanic captains. This is just another thing that makes the Blackbeard pirates a true force to be reckoned with, and only makes their emperor status even more deserved. In all honesty, a lot of their exploits have to do with stealing devil fruits, like the time that Blackbeard invaded Amazon Lily with the hopes of taking Hancock's fruit. He of course wasn't successful in doing so because Rayleigh came in and stopped him, but something pretty massive did happen because of this. You see, the Marines were also on this island because they were here to take in Hancock as well, and Blackbeard wanted to take all 800 of them hostage, as they couldn't do anything about it because of his status as an emperor. This was before the hero Kobe stepped up and said that they could take him instead, and Blackbeard of course jumped on it because of his status. It was while Blackbeard was doing this on Amazon Lily that Aokiji and Van Augur went to Big Mom's territory and kidnapped her daughter Pudding because of the fact that she's a member of the Three-Eyed Clan. So Blackbeard also has someone that will eventually grow to be able to read the poneglyphs one day, allowing him to get closer and closer to eventually being able to become the king of the pirates. They then do some even more insane shit during the Egghead Island arc, as Garp goes to Hachinosu in order to save Kobe, and even though he's successful in doing so, he is defeated and captured by Kuzan. I honestly thought that he was dead for the longest time, but we recently learned that that isn't the case, and the Blackbeard pirates have traded their current day hero for the hero of the God Valley incident. Some of the members even appeared on Egghead Island itself, as Devon might now have the ability to transform into Saturn, and Van Augur even said to Saturn's face that the Blackbeard pirates are after the entire world. The Blackbeard pirates may even now be getting some more really important information, as Caribou has finally been given the chance to meet up with them, and he knows a lot of stuff because of how long he was secretly traveling with the Straw Hats and overhearing their conversations. I absolutely love the way that Oda is handling the Blackbeard pirates, slowly building them up in the background, mainly because they become an even more dangerous threat every time they appear. It's pretty clear to me that the world government and celestial dragons are going to be the final villains of this One Piece story, but Blackbeard and his crew are definitely a wild card that make that conversation a whole lot more interesting. And with that, I think it's time to talk about the most surprising Yonko that we've gotten in the story so far, as Buggy the Clown became an Emperor of the Sea at the same time as Luffy, directly after both Big Mom and Kaido were defeated. Buggy is one of my favorite characters in the entire series, not only because he's funny and always steals the show whenever he appears, but also because of the way that Oda has written him. You see, as the reader, we get insights into Buggy's life and personality that the typical person in the One Piece world doesn't get, so that creates a disconnect between the typical One Piece citizen and the reader. As the reader, it's funny when Buggy becomes a Yonko, but to the typical One Piece citizen, a former member of the Roger Pirates and Warlord of the Sea just gained even more power. Buggy is also only weak in comparison to other pirates, so it makes complete sense as to why the world is terrified of him, and even more scared once he becomes an emperor. And Buggy actually does some pretty insane shit past the Orangetown arc, as he's one of the main members that escapes Impel Down, and really has a crazy showing during Marineford. This is another moment where he's more terrifying in the eyes of a normal One Piece citizen, as he kinda becomes the main character of the Marineford War for them when he finds the last video snail that the Navy wasn't able to shut off before the pacifistas attacked. It honestly becomes a background gag as the war goes on, but it really shines a spotlight on Buggy, and really does explain why he was able to rise the way that he did during the time skip. It was because during the time skip, not only did he ask Crocodile for money so he could start his own bounty hunting business, he also became a member of the 7 Warlords of the Sea. This makes 2 of our New World Yonko former warlords, while none of the original were, and while that could possibly mean something, I don't really want to think about it too hard. We didn't really see Buggy all that often while he was running his bounty hunting business, but we do know that it kinda went downhill once the new giant warrior pirates left it in order to follow Luffy. The craziest thing that he's done since the time skip was become an Emperor of the Sea, and that's all because of his involvement in a little bounty hunting organization called Cross Guild. This was another thing that was written great by Oda regarding Buggy's character as well, as we just saw that Buggy became an emperor during chapter 1053, but we didn't really learn why until chapter 1056. The reason why is because he's seemingly the leader of this Cross Guild, which also has powerhouses like Crocodile and Mihawk in its ranks. Now, us knowing Buggy, we know that there's no way that he's actually the leader of this thing, and we learn why he's perceived to be the next time we see him. You see, Crocodile and Mihawk weren't happy when they first heard that Buggy was the emperor of their group, so they beat him up, and he even claimed that he would clean their shoes while he begged for his life. It was all about how this sign made Buggy look like he was the most important, and Buggy continued to plead with them, telling them that it was an honest mistake. The only reason that they printed the posters like that was because they loved and admired him so much that they think that he's better than even Crocodile and Mihawk, so that's why he's in the center of the poster. This of course didn't make them happy, but it did calm them down enough for Buggy to be able to move again, but he might be in some truly deep waters the next time we see him. This is because, during Vegapunk's broadcast, he was confused by his henchmen, assuming that he was aware of the truth of the world, because Buggy never actually went to Laugh Tale due to the fact that he was sick when the Roger Pirates made their final move. He was talking to them because earlier in the broadcast, he got into an argument with Crocodile and Mihawk because he wants them to go after the One Piece since Shanks is making his move for it now. It got so bad that he even told them that they wouldn't need to fight the current emperors in order to claim it, only take the treasure, arguing that there are words that motivate pirates as they all set sail for the same reason. And then, even while being trampled by Crocodile, Buggy took advantage of the nearby Den Den Mushi to announce to the entire Cross Guild that they would search for the One Piece. He then laughed himself into tears because he knew that he might actually have to follow through with his promise of going after the One Piece. Then, when his crew proclaimed that the world would belong to him, Buggy corrected them by saying that it would belong to all of them. This may have brought the organization to tears, but Mihawk and Crocodile were unimpressed and instead told him to sit down, scaring the clown. Buggy just keeps poking the bear during his time with Mihawk and Crocodile in the Cross Guild, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's in an an even worse state the next time that we see him. Buggy is another character that I may want to make a video about just focusing on in the future. His writing is really interesting, he's really funny, and he's definitely going to play a major role as this final saga keeps unraveling. And with that, we can move on to our third Yonko of the video, as our main character Luffy recently became one at the very end of the Wano arc. It was truly an insane thing to see when it first happened, because of the fact that we've been following his entire journey firsthand, and seeing him continue to be called one to the current day just makes you proud every time you hear or read it. Now with Luffy, I feel like if I talked about all of his escapades, then we would be here forever, but I do want to give an ample amount of backstory as to how he became a Yonko, so I'm at least going to talk about most, if not all of the stuff that he's done post time skip. With that being said, he did some pretty crazy shit before the time skip, like the time he invaded a government building in order to save his friend and forced them to call in a buster call that destroyed the entire island, or the time that he escaped from the most secure prison in the entire world with some of the most dangerous criminals from that prison, or the time that he played a major role in the biggest war that the One Piece world has ever seen and became seen as a massive threat because of what he did. He also took down multiple warlords during his adventure, so his name only kept growing in the eyes of the normal citizen and the world government. This led to him having a 500 million berry bounty before the events of the time skip even started, and his infamy would only grow as time went on. The time skip would begin with some things that wouldn't raise his bounty, but did give him connections that are definitely going to come back in a big way before the story ends. First, he saved the people of Fishman Island from a guy that was trying to take it over named Hody Jones, making an ally of a powerful force and one of the three ancient weapons, Neptune. Then, the crew went to Dressrosa, where they defeated yet another warlord of the sea in Doflamingo, the most powerful one that they defeated so far. This not only gained them another powerful ally in Dressrosa, but also made the navy fight amongst each other when Fujitora apologized on the behalf of the entire navy. As we all know, those arcs were absolutely insane and have definitely helped with Luffy's development, but it was the Whole Cake Island saga that really started to build him to the figure that he is today. Firstly, in the Zou arc, he solidified the ninja, pirate, mink, samurai alliance, which really helped in the battle against Kaido, but it was the Whole Cake Island arc itself that truly went crazy. This was because, during the Whole Cake Island arc, he went against the Big Mom pirates without the majority of his crew in order to get another member back. This not only caused him to clash with Big Mom herself, but also have a long drawn out battle with one of her sweet commanders, Katakuri, which is still one of the best fights in the entire series to this day. The craziest thing about this arc is that even though Luffy took some big injuries in his fight against Katakuri, the Straw Hats got out of there with relatively no scratches and got the member back that Big Mom was trying to take away from them. That's an insane feat in itself, but one of the reasons that is really important is because Big News Morgan was also in attendance at this party, and Big News Morgan holds way more power than the world government wants him to. He's yet another character that could definitely get their own video one day, but I feel like he's gonna get some more backstory and development before the story is over, so a video on him can wait for now. Now, the reason that his presence is important for this part is because he's the one that wrote the news story after Luffy was able to get out of Big Mom's territory, and that article was heavily in the Straw Hats' favor. It was so heavily in their favor, in fact, that the news article claimed that Luffy was the 5th Emperor of the Sea after his escapades in Big Mom's territory, causing a ton of different reactions from a ton of different characters. Kobe was brought to tears, Kaido was angry because he was messing with both him and Big Mom, Blackbeard said that it was too early for him to be called an emperor, Big Mom hates Luffy even more than ever because it said that she lost, and Shanks is incredibly happy because it means that the two of them might be finally meeting soon. It was also after the events of the Whole Cake Island arc that Luffy's bounty tripled from 500 million berries all the way up to 1.5 billion berries. And then, after the Whole Cake Island arc, we all know what he did during the Wano arc, not only saving the country from 20 years of totalitarian rule, but also becoming an even bigger threat to the world government because of the fact that he awakened his devil fruit. It was his defeat of Kaido that earned him his new title as one of the 4 emperors of the sea, but it was his standing as the sun god Nika that's gonna ensure that he keeps that title because of how even bigger of a threat that he is to the world government and celestial dragons. And that's something that we've only seen more of during the Egghead Island arc and beyond, as there's a reason that his Gear 5 form is on his wanted poster when that's a form that he literally has to tap into in order to appear as. And right now during the Elbaf arc, right after this flashback is over, he'll be defending the land of Elbaf from not only the Holy Knights, but also Emu, who's controlling one of them remotely. Once Luffy fights against Emu like Rocks did, he might just be considered the biggest threat in all of the One Piece world, and I can't wait to see how Luffy's Nika powers conflict with Imu and the way that they control people. Luffy being the main character makes his status as a Yonko mean even more for the readers that have been following his journey the entire time, and Luffy is my favorite character, so I get the biggest smiles on my face whenever his status gets higher. It is kinda harder to talk about the new Yonko like Luffy and Buggy, since they really haven't held that title for all that long, but there's still some interesting things to say about them, so that's why I wanted to make this second video. And with that, we only have one current Yonko left to talk about, and it's the only Yonko that we talked about in the last video of this series, Shanks. I'm talking about him again in this video because last time we only talked about the stuff that we learned about him before the time skip, and we've learned quite a bit more about him since the time skip, especially recently. Last time we talked about his insane meetings with both Mihawk and Whitebeard before the time skip, and how he told Rayleigh about Luffy way before he even started his journey. We even talked about how he came in and stopped the Marineford War when it was already getting out of hand, and the overall aura that he had the entire time. Literally every time that Shanks appears in the story is something that pretty much every fan wants to tune in for, and since the time skip, we've learned some absolutely crazy shit about him. The craziest thing about the stuff that we've been learning about him is that most of it hasn't come in the current day, rather some absolutely insane flashbacks that have revealed a ton of cool stuff about his mysterious lore. We didn't even see this guy after the time skip until the Reverie arc, and we already talked about his first appearance, because his first appearance was all about how excited he was that Luffy was declared the 5th Emperor. And we didn't see him again until the end of the Wano arc, where 1 week after Luffy's fight with Kaido, Shanks and his crew arrived near the shores of Wano. It was around this time that Bartolomeo was ravaging through his territory, so him and his crew unfortunately couldn't go see Luffy because they had to go deal with that. It was at this time, after setting Barto as their next target, Shanks took a cup of sake, sat down with Ben Beckman, and told him that it was their time to make a move and claim the One Piece. This moment sent shockwaves through the community when this chapter first came out, as having a more active Shanks is only going to make the story even better. Speaking of an active Shanks, it was during his brief visit to Wano that he also destroyed the Admiral agenda by scaring Green Bull away by blasting his Conqueror's Haki from literal miles away. Even though Joy Boy was revealed to probably have the strongest Conqueror's Haki at the end of the Egghead Island arc, I still believe that Shanks' Conquerors is at the very top of the top tier when it comes to the power of the One Piece universe. At the end of the Wano arc, he made Green Bull run away and then tried to recruit Marco onto his crew, but he did some pretty crazy shit during the Egghead Island arc as well. This is because him and his crew were at Elbaf before the Straw Hats decided to go there, so he talked to Gaban about Luffy, and then easily defeated Kid, who tried to get revenge on him. This is insane, not only because Kid himself just had a hand in the defeat of another Yonko, but because Kid also had copies of most of the road poneglyphs, something that Shanks and crew took for themselves. The man wasn't playing when he said that it was time for them to claim the One Piece, and being a former member of Roger's crew and the figure that he is, it's definitely something that he could do. Then, we've only seen him once in the current day of the Elbaf arc so far, and that's when we cut away from the island to see what him and his crew did to Bartolomeo. They did scare the shit out of him and make him think that they were gonna kill him, but in the grand scheme of things, Shanks is just happy that Luffy has people following him that care about him as much as Bardo does. That was the last time that we saw Shanks at the current day of the story, but the stuff that we've learned about his past recently makes him even more interesting than he already was. Firstly, during the Elbaf arc, we learned that Shanks has actually had a twin brother named Shamrock that's a celestial dragon this whole time, and that's absolutely insane. Their father is a man named Figureland Garling, and he's a holy knight that recently got promoted to the Gorosei, meaning that this guy is pretty important to the secret oppressive rulers of the One Piece world. This reveal also cleared up something pretty major, because there was a moment during the Reverie arc where it seemed like Shanks was meeting with the Gorosei, and that sent the community into a frenzy. People were calling him a rat, saying that he would switch up on Luffy and everything, but it turned out that it wasn't even him in the first place, it was his brother Shamrock. During the reveal that Shanks is a twin, we also learned that Dragon was actually the one that saved Shanks as a baby back when he was a Marine. This is another insane connection between two characters that are really important to this story, as Dragon would eventually become the leader of the Revolutionary Army, and Shanks would become who he is now. And we also know that after the God Valley incident, the Roger Pirates found Shanks in a chest that they got from the island, and that's how and why he was an apprentice on their crew for such a long time. Then at some point 26 years ago, the Roger Pirates were causing a ruckus on an island, and after defeating a group of Marines, they learned that the Whitebeard Pirates docked on the other side of the island. The Roger Pirates then clashed with the Whitebeard Pirates for 3 days and 3 nights before the skirmish ultimately became a gift exchange, and it was after this battle that Odin, his family, as well as Inuarashi and Nekomamushi joined the Roger Pirates. It was shortly after Odin joined the crew that the Roger Pirates became the first people to ever make it to Laugh Tale, but Shanks unfortunately didn't get to go with them because Buggy got sick and he decided to stay back to take care of him. This may also be a reason that the both of them want to go after the One Piece now, and there's even more of an incentive to do so because of Vegapunk's message. We also talked about Shanks' various battles with Mihawk and his iconic scar in the last video, but he obviously started doing both of those things once the Roger Pirates disbanded after Roger's death. All of these things are pretty damn insane, but nothing that we've talked about so far can really compare to the information that we learned about him most recently. This is because, about 15 years ago, Shanks actually went to Maryjoa to address his status as a world noble. For an entire year, he basically cosplayed as one of them, even claiming that he would climb the ladder of the Holy Knights, and because of his heritage, he was pretty quickly able to climb the ranks. During his time up there, he also ran into Fisher Tiger on the night where he freed a ton of the Celestial Dragon's slaves, and even assisted him by pointing him in the direction of the Holy Land's armory. He did this as a full reconnaissance mission of the Holy Land, literally just there to figure out how they operate and learn more about how the Holy Knights and how they work. With that being said, 14 years ago, he just up and left Maryjoa without letting anyone know that he was leaving, and he did so right before completing his final mission to become a full-fledged knight. He learned everything that he wanted to up there, so as soon as he was done with them, he renounced his family and birthright, choosing to live in the lower world and be the pirate that he was always destined to be. Seeing someone like Shanks with the Saint next to their name is just absolutely insane, and the fact that he even played the character and went through with them for an entire year is some insane dedication to just learn more about your ops. And the final thing that we've learned from Shanks' past so far was the fact that he was actually there on the day that Loki killed Harold, and even tried to stop Harold from accepting his promotion. He just got distracted while visiting Gabon before he could. This not only explains how Shanks was able to get out of Emu's control because of what he learned, but also retroactively explains why he allowed himself to lose his arm to the sea beast when he saved Luffy, as he was actually saving himself as well the whole time. As I've said many times before, Shanks is a character that demands your attention whenever he makes an appearance, and the stuff that we've learned about him recently really makes me want to learn more about his goals and plans for the current day. And with that, we've officially talked about every character that's ever been a Yonko in the One Piece story, and even talked about Shanks twice because he's just that cool. There's obviously going to be more to talk about regarding these characters in the future, but I can't talk about the stuff that we haven't seen yet, and I'd say that the stuff that we've already seen is pretty damn absurd. With the 4 Emperors of the Sea being as important as they are, it's really awesome that they're as interesting of characters as they are, and it was a lot of fun to talk about them. With that being said, I am out of things to say about them for now, so I do think that it's time to end things here. Please join me next time for whatever I post next. Please leave a like and maybe subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.